The entrepreneur's journey reached a turning point that no one could have predicted, not even him. A few months after his speech at the tech conference, he received an invitation that made his heart race with excitement and nerves. It was from one of the largest international organizations in the world, an entity known for championing innovation and equality on a global scale. They wanted to honor him with an award for his contributions to technology and society. At first, he thought it was a mistake. "Are you sure this is meant for me?" he asked the person on the other end of the phone during the initial call. But as they explained the selection process and shared glowing testimonials from people who had nominated him, doubt gave way to gratitude. This wasn't just recognition of his work, it was acknowledgement of the values he stood for: resilience, inclusivity, and the belief that everyone deserves a fair shot. The ceremony took place in a grand hall filled with some of the brightest minds and most influential figures in the world. The room buzzed with energy as attendees mingled, exchanging ideas and stories. When his name was called to accept the award, he stepped onto the stage feeling both proud and humble. As he looked out at the sea of faces, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come, from being dismissed in that cold hotel conference room to standing here celebrated by thousands. In his acceptance speech, he didn't focus on himself. Instead, he used the moment to shine a light on others, on the young students learning to code, the interns proving their worth, and the countless individuals fighting daily battles against discrimination and inequality. "This isn't my victory," he said, holding the trophy aloft. "It belongs to every person who has ever been told they don't belong, to every dreamer who refused to give up, even when the odds felt impossible." His words resonated deeply. The audience erupted into applause, many rising to their feet. Cameras flashed, capturing the emotion etched on his face. For the first time, he allowed himself to fully embrace the magnitude of what he had achieved, not just professionally, but personally. He had turned pain into purpose, humiliation into hope, and setbacks into stepping stones. Meanwhile, the two businessmen remained trapped in their self-made prison of regret and irrelevance. Their names occasionally surfaced in tabloids or online forums, but always in the context of scandal and failure. Attempts to start over were met with skepticism and rejection. No one wanted to associate with men whose reputations were so tarnished. Even their families distanced themselves further, unable to reconcile the fathers, husbands, or brothers they once knew with the bitter, broken individuals they had become. One day, while flipping through channels on a secondhand TV in their modest apartment, they stumbled upon a news segment about the entrepreneur. The reporter highlighted his rise to success, his innovative AI platform, and the positive impact he was having on communities worldwide. One of them scoffed, muttering under his breath, "Good for him." The other simply stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. For a brief moment, there was silence between them. Then one of them spoke, his voice heavy with bitterness. "We could have had all that," he said quietly. "If things had gone differently, we'd be the ones getting awards, not him." The other man sighed, shaking his head. "It's not about luck," he replied, surprising even himself. "He earned it. We burned our own bridges." Neither said anything else after that, but deep down they both knew the truth. Their choices had sealed their fate. Arrogance and cruelty had cost them everything, not just money or deals, but respect, relationships, and redemption. Back in the entrepreneur's life, fame brought new opportunities, but it also came with challenges. More people looked to him for advice and guidance, which he welcomed, but the pressure to live up to expectations weighed on him at times. He often reminded himself that success wasn't about perfection. It was about progress. Every misstep was a chance to learn, every obstacle a test of character. To stay grounded, he leaned on the people who mattered most: his family, his team, and the community he had built around him. He made it a point to visit schools and mentorship programs regularly, ensuring that his presence wasn't just symbolic, but impactful. During one such visit, a young girl approached him nervously, clutching a notebook filled with sketches and diagrams. She explained that she wanted to design robots to help elderly people live independently. Her enthusiasm reminded him of himself at her age, full of big dreams and endless questions. He knelt down to meet her eye level and said, "You're already doing the hardest part, imagining something better. Now, keep going. Don't let anyone tell you it's impossible." Tears welled up in her eyes as she hugged him tightly. Moments like these reminded him why he kept pushing forward. Success wasn't measured in trophies or headlines. It was measured in lives touched and futures changed. As years passed, the entrepreneur's legacy continued to grow. His company became a model for ethical business practices, inspiring other organizations to prioritize diversity and inclusion. The AI platform he had poured his heart into transformed industries, creating jobs and solving real-world problems. People began referring to him not just as an innovator, but as a changemaker, a title he wore humbly. He never forgot the lessons he had learned along the way, that kindness costs nothing but means everything, that resilience is stronger than any insult, and that integrity is the foundation of lasting success. Whenever he faced doubts or challenges, he returned to these truths, finding strength in their simplicity. And though he rarely thought about the two businessmen anymore, he sometimes wondered if they had found peace. Maybe they had realized their mistakes and sought forgiveness, or maybe they carried their bitterness to the grave. Either way, he hoped they understood that their downfall wasn't punishment. It was a reminder. Karma isn't about revenge. It's about reflection. What we put out into the world comes back to us, whether it's love or hate, kindness or cruelty. On quiet evenings, sitting on his porch with a cup of coffee, he would look up at the stars and smile. Life had taken him on a journey he never could have imagined. A journey filled with pain, triumph, and transformation. Against all odds, he had risen above negativity, turning rejection into resolve and dreams into reality. As he sipped his coffee, he whispered softly to himself, "Thank you. Thank you to the haters who underestimated him. Thank you to the supporters who believed in him. And thank you to the universe for showing him that true strength lies not in power or wealth, but in the courage to stand up, speak out, and keep moving forward." Because in the end, it wasn't about winning or losing. It was about becoming someone who inspired others to do the same, to chase their dreams, to fight for justice, and to leave the world a little brighter than they found it. And that, he decided, was the greatest legacy of all. The entrepreneur's journey wasn't just about personal success anymore. It had evolved into something much bigger. His company became a force for good, not just in the tech industry, but in communities around the world. Every decision he made was guided by a simple principle: if you're given a platform, use it to lift others up. This philosophy didn't just shape his business practices, it defined who he was as a leader. One of the most impactful initiatives he launched was a mentorship program aimed at young people from underrepresented backgrounds. The idea came to him after meeting Lisa, the intern whose quiet brilliance had reminded him so much of his younger self. He realized that while scholarships and workshops were important, what many aspiring entrepreneurs truly needed was guidance. Someone who could show them the ropes, answer their questions, and remind them that they weren't alone. So he created a structured program where experienced professionals from his company volunteered their time to mentor students and early career individuals. The response was overwhelming. Applications poured in from all over the country, each one telling a unique story of struggle and ambition. Some applicants were first-generation college students trying to break into fields dominated by privilege. Others were self-taught coders who had learned everything they knew from free online resources. And then there were those who simply wanted to believe that their dreams weren't too big for the world they lived in. Each pairing between a mentor and mentee was carefully considered. The entrepreneur insisted on matching people based not just on skill sets but also on shared experiences. He believed that empathy was just as important as expertise when it came to mentorship. For example, he paired Lisa with a senior developer who had grown up in a similar neighborhood and faced the same doubts about belonging in tech. Watching their bond grow over weekly video calls filled him with pride. It wasn't just about teaching code or algorithms. It was about building confidence, fostering curiosity, and proving that no dream was out of reach. But the impact didn't stop there. As his company grew, he expanded its focus beyond mentorship. He partnered with local schools to provide coding workshops for kids as young as 8 years old. These sessions weren't just about learning programming languages. They were about sparking creativity and problem-solving skills. Kids built simple games, designed apps, and even worked together to solve real-world challenges like recycling waste or tracking water usage. Seeing their eyes light up during these activities reminded him why he fell in love with technology in the first place. It wasn't just a tool for profit, it was a way to make the world better. He also collaborated with nonprofits to bring digital literacy programs to underserved areas. In rural towns and urban neighborhoods alike, entire families attended weekend classes to learn basic computer skills. Parents discovered how to search for jobs online, teenagers figured out how to design websites, and grandparents mastered video calls to stay connected with loved ones far away. Each success story reinforced his belief that access to technology wasn't just a luxury, it was a necessity. Meanwhile, the two businessmen continued to fade into obscurity, their names reduced to cautionary tales whispered in boardrooms and coffee shops. Their attempts to rebuild their reputations failed miserably. They tried launching new ventures, but no one trusted them enough to invest. Potential partners saw their track record of arrogance and cruelty and steered clear. Even networking events, once their playground, now felt hostile. People avoided eye contact, pretending not to notice them standing awkwardly by the buffet table. Their legal troubles only compounded their misery. Lawsuits from former employees piled up, exposing years of discriminatory practices and toxic behavior. Settlements drained whatever remained of their wealth, leaving them struggling to cover basic expenses. Rumors circulated that they had sold off their luxury cars, yachts, and vacation homes just to keep afloat. Yet, despite losing nearly everything, they clung to their old ways, blaming everyone else for their downfall. "They don't understand us," one of them muttered bitterly during a rare public appearance. "We were just doing business the way it's always been done." But the world had moved on. What they called business as usual was now seen for what it really was: outdated, harmful, and unacceptable. Their refusal to acknowledge their mistakes only deepened the divide between them and society. Eventually, they disappeared entirely from public view. Some said they had moved to a small town, living quietly under assumed names. Others claimed they worked odd jobs to make ends meet, humbled by circumstances they couldn't control. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain. The men who had once wielded immense power and influence were now shadows of their former selves. Karma, it seemed, had delivered its final verdict. Back in the entrepreneur's life, recognition came knocking in unexpected ways. One morning, he received an email inviting him to speak at a prestigious tech conference. The event drew thousands of attendees from across the globe, including industry giants, innovators, and policymakers. When he accepted the invitation, he didn't expect anything extraordinary. He assumed it would be another opportunity to share his story and inspire others. But what happened next took him completely by surprise. As he walked onto the stage, the audience erupted into applause. It wasn't polite clapping or obligatory cheers. It was thunderous, heartfelt, and sustained. For several seconds he stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of support. Finally, regaining his composure, he smiled and began to speak. "Never thought I'd stand here today," he admitted, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "There was a time when I doubted whether my ideas mattered, whether my voice deserved to be heard. I let other people tell me I didn't belong, and for a while I almost believed them." He paused, scanning the sea of faces before him. But then something changed. "I realized that failure isn't the end. It's just a chapter in your story. You get to decide how the rest unfolds. And if you choose to rise above negativity, to focus on creating value instead of seeking revenge, amazing things can happen." The room was silent, every person hanging on his words. He went on to talk about his company, its mission, and the importance of diversity in innovation. He shared anecdotes from his mentorship program, highlighting stories of resilience and triumph. By the end of his speech, tears glistened in more than a few eyes, including his own. When he finished, the crowd rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Journalists rushed to interview him backstage, eager to capture his insights for articles and documentaries. Fellow speakers approached him, congratulating him on a powerful presentation. For the first time in his life, he felt like he truly belonged, not because of external validation, but because he had earned it through hard work, integrity, and kindness. That night, as he sat alone in his hotel room reflecting on the day's events, he thought about the two businessmen. Not out of anger or bitterness, but out of curiosity. What must it feel like to lose everything you've built? To wake up every morning knowing that your choices led you to this point? He didn't envy them, nor did he wish them further harm. Instead, he felt a strange sense of gratitude for the contrast they provided, for reminding him of the type of person he never wanted to become. Karma, he realized, wasn't just about punishment. It was about lessons. The two men had chosen arrogance and cruelty, and their lives reflected that choice. He had chosen resilience and grace, and his life reflected that too. Both paths were clear, undeniable proof that our actions shape our destinies. As he drifted off to sleep, he smiled softly, thinking about the future. There was still so much work to do, so many barriers to break, so many dreams to nurture. But, for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace. Against all odds, he had turned pain into purpose. And that, he decided, was the greatest victory of all. As the entrepreneur's company began to grow, he found himself stepping into a role he hadn't anticipated, a symbol of resilience. People weren't just interested in his AI platform, they were inspired by his journey. The way he had faced humiliation head-on and refused to let it break him struck a chord with so many others who had experienced similar struggles. Strangers reached out daily, sharing their own stories of discrimination, self-doubt, and perseverance. Some were entrepreneurs like him, fighting to make their mark in industries that often shut them out. Others were students, parents, or professionals who simply needed to hear that it was okay to keep going, even when the world felt unfair. He decided early on that he wouldn't shy away from these connections. Instead, he embraced them. He started writing posts on social media about his experiences, not just the painful moments, but also the lessons he'd learned along the way. Success isn't about avoiding failure, he wrote in one post. It's about finding the strength to stand back up every time you fall. Those words resonated deeply, earning thousands of likes and shares. Readers commented, thanking him for reminding them that they weren't alone. But it wasn't just online, where his story spread. Invitations to speak at conferences, schools, and community events poured in. At first, public speaking terrified him. He worried about saying the wrong thing or coming across as unprepared. But each time he stepped onto a stage, he reminded himself why he was there, to share hope, not perfection. His talks became less about polished speeches and more about genuine conversations. He spoke openly about the meeting that had gone so horribly wrong, the pain he'd felt afterward, and how he'd chosen to channel that pain into something positive. One event stood out in particular. It was a small gathering at a local high school, organized by a group of teachers who wanted to inspire their students. Many of the kids came from underserved communities, facing challenges most adults couldn't imagine. When he walked into the auditorium, he noticed the skepticism in their eyes. These were teenagers who had been told repeatedly, whether directly or indirectly, that opportunities weren't meant for people like them. He started by telling them about his own childhood. Growing up, he hadn't had much. His family worked hard to provide for him, but money was always tight. There were times when he doubted whether he'd ever escape the cycle of struggle. But through it all, he held on to one belief: education could open doors. Even when resources were scarce, he soaked up every bit of knowledge he could find, in books, online courses, and late-night experiments on his computer. The room grew quieter as he spoke. By the end of his talk, hands shot up eagerly during the Q&A session. One student asked, "What do you do when people try to bring you down?" Another wondered, "How do you stay focused when everything feels impossible?" He answered honestly, drawing from his own life. You focus on what you can control, he said. You can't stop people from being cruel, but you can decide how you respond. And when things feel overwhelming, take it one step at a time. Celebrate the small wins because those add up. Afterward, several students approached him to thank him personally. One boy, barely 16, shook his hand firmly and said, I didn't think anyone would care about my ideas, but hearing your story makes me believe I can actually do this. That moment stayed with him long after he left the school. It wasn't fame or recognition he craved. It was knowing that his journey might help someone else take their first step toward theirs. While the entrepreneur's star continued to rise, the two businessmen spiraled further into obscurity. Their empire, once a towering symbol of success, now lay in ruins. Lawsuits mounted, draining what little money they had left. Former employees, emboldened by the public exposure of their toxic behavior, filed claims of harassment and discrimination. Clients who had once flocked to them now distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with such controversy. Even their closest friends abandoned them, unable to defend actions that had become indefensible. Their attempts to salvage their reputations only made matters worse. They appeared on television, pleading their case and insisting they were misunderstood. We're not bad people, one of them argued weakly. This is all a misunderstanding. But viewers saw right through the act. Social media erupted with mockery, memes and hashtags mocking their desperate attempts to rewrite history. Every interview they gave seemed to dig them deeper into the hole they had created for themselves. Eventually, they retreated from the spotlight altogether, disappearing from public view. Rumors swirled about their whereabouts. Some claimed they had moved abroad to escape scrutiny, while others whispered they were living in near poverty, stripped of everything they had built. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear: their downfall was complete. The arrogance and entitlement that had defined their careers had ultimately destroyed them. Back in the entrepreneur's world, life took on a new rhythm. With the support of the venture capitalist and other investors, his company expanded rapidly. New hires joined the team, bringing fresh ideas and energy. Offices opened in multiple cities, allowing him to reach markets he'd never dreamed of accessing. Yet, despite the growth, he remained grounded. He made it a point to visit each office regularly, sitting down with employees to hear their thoughts and concerns. He knew firsthand how isolating it could feel to work under leaders who didn't value your input, and he was determined never to repeat that mistake. One day, while touring a newly opened branch, he met a young intern named Lisa. She was quiet but clearly brilliant, her eyes lighting up whenever she talked about coding. During a casual conversation, she mentioned that she had almost dropped out of college because she didn't think tech was a place for someone like her. Then I saw your story, she admitted shyly, and I realized maybe I could belong here, too. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut, not because they surprised him, but because they reminded him of his own doubts years ago. He smiled warmly and said, Lisa, don't ever let anyone tell you that you don't belong. If anything, proving them wrong is the best revenge. Moments like these fueled his determination to use his success for good. He launched initiatives aimed at supporting underrepresented groups in tech, mentorship programs, scholarships, and workshops designed to equip aspiring entrepreneurs with the tools they needed to succeed. He partnered with nonprofits working to close the digital divide, ensuring that access to technology wasn't limited to those who could afford it. For him, success wasn't just about building a profitable company. It was about creating opportunities for others to build their own futures. As months turned into years, the contrast between the two paths couldn't have been starker. The two businessmen faded into obscurity, their names synonymous with greed and cruelty. Meanwhile, the entrepreneur became a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of resilience and integrity. His company thrived, not just financially, but culturally. Employees described it as a place where everyone felt valued, regardless of background or identity. Clients praised its commitment to innovation and fairness. Looking back, he often thought about the day that had changed everything. The day he walked out of that hotel conference room feeling humiliated and defeated. At the time, he couldn't. have imagined how that moment would set off a chain reaction, leading to both personal triumph and widespread change. Karma, he realized, wasn't just about punishment or reward. It was about choices and the ripple effects they created. For him, the lesson was simple: kindness and perseverance always win in the end. The two businessmen had chosen arrogance and cruelty, and their lives reflected that choice. He had chosen resilience and grace, and his life reflected that too. And though he never sought revenge, he couldn't help but smile sometimes, knowing that the universe had a way of balancing itself out. The man sat on his couch late that night, staring at his phone as notifications continued to flood in. Each message carried a different tone. Some were outraged on his behalf, others offered words of encouragement, and a few even shared their own stories of facing similar challenges. It was overwhelming, but in a way that made him feel less alone. For so long, he had carried the weight of discrimination silently, thinking it was just part of the journey. But now, seeing how many people stood with him, he realized he wasn't fighting this battle by himself. One particular message caught his attention. It came from someone whose name he didn't recognize at first, a venture capitalist known for supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs. Her words were simple yet powerful. "I saw your story online. You've got grit, and I'd love to hear more about your project." At first, he thought it might be a prank or some kind of scam. After all, why would someone like her reach out to him after everything that had happened? But something about her tone felt genuine. So, cautiously, he replied, thanking her for reaching out and expressing interest in discussing his work further. Over the next few days, they exchanged messages, slowly building trust. She asked thoughtful questions, not just about his AI platform, but about his journey, his struggles, and what drove him to keep going despite the obstacles. He found himself opening up in ways he hadn't expected, sharing not only his professional goals but also the personal toll that years of bias and prejudice had taken on him. To his surprise, she listened without judgment, offering advice and insights that showed she truly understood where he was coming from. Their conversations eventually led to a meeting. This time, it wasn't in a cold conference room filled with hostility. It was over video call, with warmth and mutual respect setting the tone. As he presented his ideas, he noticed something remarkable. She didn't interrupt him. She didn't make snide comments or dismiss his vision. Instead, she leaned in, genuinely curious about how his platform could solve real-world problems. By the end of the call, she smiled warmly and said, "You're onto something big here. Let's make it happen." For the first time in days, maybe even weeks, he allowed himself to feel hopeful. Hopeful that his hard work might finally pay off. Hopeful that people could see past stereotypes and recognize talent when they saw it. And hopeful that maybe, just maybe, the world was starting to change. Meanwhile, the two businessmen were reeling from the fallout of their actions. The $120 million deal they had been so confident about securing was gone, evaporated into thin air because of a single viral video. News outlets picked up the story, amplifying the voices of those who had called them out online. Former employees, emboldened by the public outcry, began speaking up about their experiences working under the duo. Stories of harassment, unequal treatment, and outright discrimination surfaced one after another, painting a damning picture of their leadership style. At first, the two men tried to deny everything. They issued a carefully worded statement claiming the video was taken out of context and insisting they were committed to diversity and inclusion. But no one bought it. The evidence was too clear, too undeniable. Their attempts to save face only made things worse, fueling even more backlash. Clients canceled contracts, business partners severed ties, and lawsuits piled up faster than they could handle. Their once glamorous lives unraveled quickly. Invitations to exclusive events dried up. Friends stopped returning their calls. Even their families distanced themselves, embarrassed by the storm of controversy surrounding them. What started as a joke, a cruel dismissal of someone they deemed inferior, had spiraled into a full-blown catastrophe. Every decision they had ever made based on arrogance and entitlement came back to haunt them. But while karma dealt its blow to the two men, life took a different turn for the entrepreneur. With the venture capitalist's support, He refined his pitch, focusing not just on the technical aspects of his AI platform, but also on its potential to create meaningful change. He knew that investors wanted numbers and projections, but they also cared about impact. His platform wasn't just about efficiency. It was about leveling the playing field for businesses of all sizes, regardless of location or resources. He started small, pitching to smaller firms and angel investors who shared his vision. Each presentation went better than the last. People were drawn not only to his innovative ideas but also to his authenticity. When he spoke, you could hear the passion in his voice, the same passion that had kept him going through years of rejection and struggle. Slowly but surely, the funding began rolling in. It wasn't millions overnight, but it was enough to keep moving forward. Word of his resilience spread beyond the tech community. Journalists reached out, asking to feature him in articles and interviews. Podcast hosts invited him to share his story with wider audiences. At first, he hesitated. Talking about what had happened still felt raw, like reopening a wound that hadn't fully healed. But then he realized something important. If sharing his experience could inspire others to keep pushing despite adversity, it was worth it. During one interview, the host asked him a question that stuck with him long after the cameras stopped rolling. "What do you think happened to those two men?" she asked gently. "Do you hold any anger toward them?" He paused, reflecting before answering. "Honestly," he said, "I don't have time to focus on anger. What they did was wrong and it hurt, but holding on to that pain wouldn't help me move forward. If anything, I feel sorry for them. Because while I'm building something positive, they're losing everything they worked for, all because of their own choices." His answer resonated deeply with viewers. Social media lit up again, this time not with outrage but with admiration. People praised him not just for his success but for his ability to rise above bitterness and focus on creating something meaningful. His story became a symbol of hope, a reminder that setbacks don't define you unless you let them. As months passed, his company gained momentum. The AI platform launched successfully, earning praise from industry experts and users alike. Companies large and small adopted it, transforming their operations and boosting productivity. Jobs were created, partnerships formed, and communities benefited, all because one man refused to give up, even when the odds seemed insurmountable, and, though he never sought revenge against the two businessmen, he couldn't help but notice how drastically their fortunes had changed. Once powerful figures reduced to laughingstocks, their names tarnished beyond repair. Karma, it seemed, had delivered its verdict swiftly and decisively. But for him, it wasn't about gloating over their downfall. It was about proving that integrity, perseverance, and kindness always win in the end. Life, he realized, had a funny way of balancing itself out. While the two men lost everything due to their own arrogance, he gained far more than money or recognition. He gained a renewed sense of purpose. And that, he decided, was the greatest victory of all. The man stepped out of the hotel, his mind racing with thoughts he couldn't quite untangle. The weight of what had just happened pressed heavily on him, but he refused to let it show. He walked briskly, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement, trying to put as much distance between himself and that suffocating conference room as possible. His chest felt tight, and his hands gripped the strap of his laptop bag a little too tightly. Inside, he replayed every moment, the dismissive smirks, the cutting remarks, the way they had belittled him without even giving him a fair chance. It wasn't just about the rejection, it was the way they had treated him like he didn't belong in that room, like his dreams were laughable simply because of who he was. For a brief second, doubt crept in. Was he wasting his time chasing something so far out of reach? But then he shook his head, forcing those thoughts away. No, he reminded himself, this wasn't about them. Their opinions didn't define him. As he turned a corner heading toward the parking lot where his car was parked, he noticed someone standing nearby. A young woman, probably in her mid-20s, leaned casually against a lamppost, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up briefly, caught sight of him, and quickly looked back down. but something about her expression made him pause.
Had she been watching him?
He dismissed the thought and kept walking. Unbeknownst to him, though, this stranger had indeed seen everything, or at least part of it. Earlier, while waiting for a friend near the hotel entrance, she'd overheard snippets of the conversation, coming from the conference room. The raised voices, the sarcastic tone, the cruel laughter, it had all drifted into the hallway. Curious, she peeked inside just in time to see the two businessmen mocking the man who now stood outside, clearly shaken but determined not to show it. Her heart sank as she watched him pack up his things and leave. Something about the situation didn't sit right with her. She grabbed her phone instinctively and started recording as soon as he exited the room. Her intention wasn't malicious. She simply wanted to document what she'd witnessed. Maybe it would help him later. Or maybe she just needed to do something, anything, to counteract the injustice she'd seen. Back inside the hotel, the two businessmen were still seated at the conference table, chuckling over their behavior. They seemed oblivious to the fact that their actions might have consequences. To them, it was nothing more than a joke, a harmless bit of fun at someone else's expense. "Can you believe that guy actually thought we'd take him seriously?" one of them said, shaking his head. "What a waste of time." "I know," the other replied, laughing. "Honestly, I almost feel bad for him. Almost." Their laughter echoed through the empty room, but it wouldn't stay contained for long. Within minutes, the video clip recorded by the young woman found its way online. Social media platforms lit up almost instantly. People were outraged, not just by the blatant disrespect shown in the footage, but by the entitlement and arrogance displayed by the two men. Comments poured in from all corners of the internet. Some expressed sympathy for the man, praising his composure despite the obvious hostility he faced. Others condemned the businessmen, calling out their behavior as unacceptable and shameful. Hashtags began trending. Stand with him, no to discrimination, justice for entrepreneurs. The story spread like wildfire, capturing the attention of news outlets, activists, and even rival companies. Meanwhile, the man remained completely unaware of the storm brewing online. After leaving the hotel, he drove straight home, needing some time alone to process what had happened. Sitting in his living room, he stared blankly at the wall, replaying the meeting in his head. Despite the sting of humiliation, he reminded himself why he started this journey in the first place. He hadn't come this far to let anyone, or anything, stop him. Later that evening, as he scrolled through his phone absent-mindedly, notifications began flooding in. Messages from friends, colleagues, and even strangers filled his inbox. At first, he was confused. Why was everyone reaching out? Then he saw the video. Someone had posted footage of him leaving the hotel, along with audio, of the insults hurled at him during the meeting. His stomach churned as he watched it. Part of him wished he hadn't seen it, wished the world hadn't seen it, but another part of him felt relieved. Relieved that people finally understood what he dealt with every single day. Relieved that his experience wasn't being ignored or brushed aside. The support he received was overwhelming. Thousands of people shared the video, amplifying his story. Many left encouraging comments, telling him not to give up and reminding him that his work mattered. Others offered practical help, connections, advice, and even funding opportunities. One message stood out in particular. It came from a prominent venture capitalist known for supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs. She introduced herself warmly and asked if he'd be open to discussing potential investment opportunities. At first, he hesitated. Was this real? Could something good really come out of such a painful experience? But after exchanging a few messages, he realized she was genuine. She admired his resilience and believed in the potential of his AI platform. More importantly, she respected him, not just as an entrepreneur, but as a person. While all of this unfolded, the two businessmen went about their day, blissfully unaware of the chaos erupting around them. Their next appointment was with representatives from a major international conglomerate, a deal worth $120 million hanging in the balance. They arrived at the meeting confident, expecting nothing less than success. After all, deals like this were routine for them. What could possibly go wrong? But as fate would have it, karma has a way of catching up when least expected. During the meeting, one of the conglomerate's executives received a text message containing the now viral video. As he watched it, his expression darkened. Without saying a word, he passed his phone to the others at the table. One by one they viewed the footage, their faces growing increasingly grim. When the video ended, silence filled the room. Finally, the CEO spoke, his voice cold and clipped. "Is this true?" he asked, looking directly at the two businessmen. They stammered, denying responsibility and claiming the video was taken out of context. But their excuses fell flat. The evidence was undeniable. The CEO stood abruptly, signaling the end of the meeting. "We will not be doing business with you," he declared firmly before walking out, followed by his team. The two men sat there stunned as the reality of their situation sank in. Their $120 million deal, the culmination of months of negotiations, was gone in an instant, and it was entirely their fault. Outside the meeting room, whispers spread among employees and associates who had heard about the incident. News traveled fast within corporate circles, and soon, the two men became pariahs. Clients distanced themselves, fearing association with such controversy. Lawsuits piled up as former employees came forward with stories of harassment and discrimination. Their once thriving empire crumbled under the weight of their own hubris. For the man, however, life took a different turn. With the support of the venture capitalist and countless others inspired by his story, he refined his pitch and secured the funding he needed to bring his AI platform to life. What started as a humiliating defeat transformed into a defining moment, one that propelled him toward greater heights. And though he never sought revenge, he couldn't help but feel a sense of poetic justice. Karma, it seemed, had delivered its verdict swiftly and decisively. In the bustling city of Chicago, where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and dreams were both made and shattered, there lived a man who had fought his way to success against all odds. This man wasn't born into privilege or handed opportunities on a silver platter. He was someone who worked tirelessly, pouring his heart and soul into building something meaningful. His name isn't important here, but what he stood for is, this man had built a company from scratch. It wasn't easy. There were sleepless nights, countless rejections, and moments when giving up seemed like the only option. But he didn't give up. Instead, he kept pushing forward, driven by a vision that technology could change lives. His latest project? A groundbreaking AI platform designed to revolutionize supply chain logistics. It was smart, efficient, and unlike anything the market had seen before. One day he received an invitation that felt like a dream come true. Two wealthy businessmen known for their influence in the industry wanted to meet him. They had heard about his work and were interested in learning more. For anyone trying to make it big, this kind of opportunity was golden. These men weren't just investors. They were gatekeepers to a world many aspired to enter. The meeting was set at a luxurious downtown hotel, a place where the rich and powerful often gathered to discuss deals worth millions. On the morning of the meeting, the man woke up early, dressed in his best suit, and rehearsed his pitch one last time. He knew how crucial this moment was. If everything went well, his dream could become a reality. With his laptop tucked under his arm, he walked into the conference room ready to impress. But as soon as he stepped inside, he noticed something unsettling. The two businessmen greeted him with polite smiles, but there was something off about their body language. One of them leaned back casually in his chair while the other glanced at his watch as if already bored. Still, the man shook off the feeling. He reminded himself that first impressions mattered, so he took a deep breath and began his presentation. He started strong, explaining the core idea behind his platform and showing slides filled with data and visuals. His voice was confident and his passion was evident. You could tell he believed in what he was saying. But as the minutes ticked by, things began to shift. At first it was small things, a dismissive laugh here, a sarcastic comment there. Then came the interruptions. Every time he tried to explain a key point, one of the men would cut him off with a remark that felt more condescending than curious. Do you even know how much money something like this costs? One of them asked, raising an eyebrow. Or are you expecting us to throw cash your way because, well, you're different? The tone was unmistakable. There was no curiosity in their questions, only mockery. The man paused, taken aback. He wasn't sure how to respond. Was this really happening? Had he misread the situation entirely? Before he could gather his thoughts, the second businessman chimed in. Honestly, I don't get why we're wasting our time, he said, leaning forward slightly. You seem like a nice guy, but let's be real. This isn't exactly your area of expertise, is it? The words hit hard, but the man forced himself to stay composed. He reminded himself that these men didn't define his worth. Still, the sting of their comments lingered. Each insult was delivered with a smirk, as though they found amusement in tearing him down. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere was suffocating. The man packed up his belongings quietly, thanked them for their time, even though they hadn't given him any, and left the room without looking back. As he walked out of the hotel, he couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions: anger, frustration, and sadness. But beneath it all, there was also determination. He refused to let their negativity break him. Little did he know, however, that karma works in mysterious ways. What happened next would not only expose the true nature of those men, but also open doors he never thought possible.